So you are an instructional designer, a learning developer, or a leader who's responsible for helping the people in your organization to learn. And you've heard about this crazy tool called Google Notebook LM. You're wondering, how do I use this? Is it legitimate? And what are the implications for the instructional design theory, the field of instructional design, the future of the industry? And you're wondering, how can I use it? Well, we're going to go over all of that in this episode and help you to advance your Gen AI skills and get on that cutting edge. All right, so let's jump right in. In order to use Notebook LM, you will go to notebooklm.google. Pretty simple. And then go ahead and click Try Notebook LM. And you'll go ahead and hop in there. And once you've gotten in, you'll be able to click this button here, Create New. And I'm just going to use a Google Doc. And I'm just going to put some notes in here. It's about 12 pages of research notes. And it looks like there is an error here. So I've not seen this before. Error, try again. Okay. So I'll walk you through. This is real here. Walk you through the whole thing. Go to Google Docs again. And I'm clicking this. I'm going to double click. And it should insert it there. And here we go. Success. So I can go in here and customize this. I can tell it what to focus on. Or I can just click generate. And what did that take? Including the error, took about a minute. So this part takes a few minutes. And so I'm going to skip to what I have here. And it's done, right? Then you can play it here. And you can also download it. So I downloaded that. And I will play part of this for you now.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We are going to be unpacking some pretty interesting stuff in the world of AI today. Our source material today, it's actually notes from a workforce alignment review for a master's program. And it's in applied AI. Basically, they're trying to figure out what skills their graduates will need to be successful in 2027 and beyond. Now, you might think this is all about hardcore coding, but that's where things get kind of surprising.
Yeah, what's fascinating is these notes actually point to a shift away from purely technical skills. It's not that coding is irrelevant, but the sources highlight a change in the type of coding work that'll be valuable.
So it's not like coding is dead.
Yeah.
But maybe coding as we know it is evolving.
Exactly. One of the sources actually quotes Jensen Huang. He is the CEO of NVIDIA, and he says, "In the future, everyone is a coder because code is human language."
Whoa.
Think about that. We're moving towards a world where interacting with AI might feel more like having a conversation than writing complex code.
I see. Okay, so I'm starting to see where this is going. The sources also mentioned that AI is already speeding up the work of developers.
Right. There's a McKinsey study cited that found that developers using AI tools were 20% to 50% faster.
Wow.
And Google, for example, is reportedly using AI to generate a quarter of its internal code.
Oh, wow.
This isn't science fiction. It's happening right now.
Yeah, so
you saw it there, and I added a little, visual thing so that you had something to look at while you're listening. Incidentally, I think tools like this are particularly what it was talking about in the workforce alignment. So I do some consulting for Utah Valley University here in Utah. I'm doing some research and advising them on their AI master's degree and their new bachelor's degree and some other certifications and programs. And so one of the questions is, what do we prepare students for, right? And if you were going to go into production quality or voice acting or software development, you would have an opportunity to look at that and say, what's happening here in these industries? And thanks to technologies like this, there's a lot of automation. So if I think that if there were this many people competing before, now if there's this many jobs, you've got this many people competing for this many jobs, at some point the increase in productivity kind of strips away from the increases in demand. There will surely be increases in demand as the economy grows, but just those massive increases in productivity create this conundrum. It's maybe I should not go into voice acting if tools like this are emerging and they're just very high quality. In the first iteration of this that I did, it was funny because they were interrupting each other a little too much, and it was just kind of funny. Like you hear that on podcasts. There's smooth moments and not so smooth moments, and most of the moments are pretty smooth. The ones that you heard, I think, were pretty good, pretty high quality, and it's just fascinating to me the quality of the intonation and the naturalness of their voices, and you hear them breathing like, oh, like, yeah, like it's so interesting to hear the sighs and the human noises that are so authentic sounding and that bring us into it. So I think there's huge opportunities here for instructional designers, for those who are responsible for helping learners and organizations learn, and as well as for individuals. And the way that this has been advertised, the way that I've seen it represented, is like, hey, you can use this to learn stuff. Just put your document in there, and you can and they'll talk about it, and you can learn about this document without having to wade through like heavy jargon and figure out like, what is this saying exactly? What does it mean, right? They kind of do that work for you, and you can even put in up to, you might have seen as I was showing you the process, you can put up to 50 documents in here. So imagine you're trying to wrap your head around this big concept, and maybe you're working on a project and there's like a ton of project documents, or you are working on writing a paper and there are dozens and dozens of academic journal articles that you've got to sort through and figure out, what does all this mean, right? And so you've got this super smart AI brain, so to speak, that can fill you in on this. So from the individual learner perspective, I think it has just a massive potential use. And from a research perspective, and also from an instructional design perspective, let's say that you're preparing something for your learners, you can do this. You can even edit it. Let's say that it creates this 10-minute thing or 12-minute thing, and it says something that you don't like. Well, you can pull that out. You can edit it out, right? So how to use this, right? Get it, edit it, put some pretty visual in there like I did. And then I've also seen people they'll use HeyGen, and they'll grab the characters from HeyGen, or you can use your own. You can take pictures, like you can generate fake people, images of fake people, and use them, and they'll turn them. HeyGen will turn them into talking characters. And what was done is they took these characters, and they had one that was very, very masculine looking, and one that was more feminine looking, to represent these voices, and then they had them talk back and forth as if it was a video call, which was far more engaging. So I imagine that in time that you'll be able to dump something in, and the HeyGen will do the editing work for you. Tools like that to so that you don't have to edit as much, and like, oh, okay, this is where the voice cuts in, this is where I need to cut to this character. That's the current state, but future, yeah, it could get much easier. And I imagine also that in the future you'll be able to add like, oh, not just 2 voices, but 3, 4, 5, like, and then of course you can imagine that this could turn into TV shows and all kinds of documentaries and all kinds of things. So the future is just, I think, looks a little bit insane for what we can potentially do with these technologies. And it used to be that if you wanted something like this, you had to write a script, right? You had to literally like soak through those documents yourself. You had to write the script, and then you had to hire voice actors or find people within your organization. And I've worked with recruiters a lot, because recruiters, they're always working on their voice. They're salespeople, right? And so I've used recruiters within the organization, like, hey, can I just borrow you for an hour and we can record this thing, or if it's even shorter than that. But it takes all that, and then if there's something that needs updating, you have to go back to them. But this, you can just regenerate, right? You can just regenerate another one. It's fantastic. And then let's say you generate one and it's like, oh, this is the documentation, something in the documentation is wrong, we don't know what it is. Like, you can tell it in that box. Remember, like if there's anything you want to emphasize, like you can say, don't talk about this, don't talk about this, don't talk about this, emphasize these three things. You can guide it like that by giving it a prompt and really kind of direct it in what it's going to say. So just as you would if you were basically going to sponsor a podcast, I think you have that same ability now. Like, hey, I'm going to sponsor this podcast, and pharmaceutical companies do this, and it's like they kind of do this to the news stations. They're like, hey, like just don't say anything that's bad about our pharmaceutical campaigns here. And is that ethical? Well, maybe the Europeans would say no, but that's what we do in America. So you have that power now to do that with your own podcast. And 100 times in my head I've thought, oh, I could like do 100 of these in a day and just like throw them up online. But back to instructional design. So I actually plugged this into ChatGPT, and I'm just going to read here some of the things that I got out of it. My prompt was, if you had a magical tool that could make a high quality podcast about any document, how would this relate to instructional design theories and instructional design as a whole, and how could it help organizations and individual learners? What would that mean for corporate learning and higher education? Cognitive load theory. Podcasts simplify dense documents into auditory content, reducing cognitive overload by chunking information into digestible audio segments. Isn't that the truth? They provide the option to pause, rewind, or play, aligning with principles of effective learning pacing. And learner control is another term that I remember from grad school, right? Number 2, coding theory. Podcasts engage auditory processing while allowing learners to visualize mental images, reinforcing understanding through dual coding, auditory and visual. That is fascinating. So they kind of tell it like a story, and you're able to visualize these people, you're able to visualize the concepts, and that helps with recall. Number 3, constructivism. Learners can contextualize and interpret auditory information within their experiences, fostering deeper engagement and self-directed learning. So let's say that you took a lengthy document and you said, in that little prompt box, you said, talk about how this document relates to my learning area, my learning context, my company, my the class topic for this week, and whatever that is, fill in the blank and put some detail around that in that prompt box, and then you've got this immediate application. So that goes back to relevance. I'm always talking about with instructional design, making it relevant for the learner, and oh, what an opportunity that is. Number 4, universal design for learning, UDL. Audio formats address diverse learning needs, catering to auditory learners, visually impaired individuals, and those with limited time to read, which is everybody almost, right? Those with limited time to read. And number 5, andragogy, adult learning. So adult learners value learning that is flexible and immediately applicable. Podcasts offer portable, on-demand access to content ideal for busy adults. Isn't that the case? And really, like, we're talking about instructional design, but we're also talking about the value for the learner to be able to go in and use this themselves. So I think that if you can teach the learners to be more independent, if you can make managers and executives and individuals, if you can make them instructional designers, oh, that lightens your load, doesn't it? And if they have this, I mean, it's free. So if you just taught a class on this, like, hey, I'm going to teach you a class on how to use this thing and how you can just plug a lengthy document in. Like some executives or managers, some individuals, they want to write this super lengthy email, and it's like 2 pages or 3 pages of thoughts, and it's like, okay, that could be a meeting, or it could be a podcast, right? Just shove it in there and then allow people to listen to it at their leisure whenever it's convenient. I love it. So let's talk about really quick. It goes on, how it could help organizations and individual learners. So, organizations, scalability. This is great, right? Organizations can rapidly disseminate consistent training materials. Engagement, interactive and dynamic podcasts can make dry material like policies more engaging. I'm not sure how interactive a podcast is, but it's dynamic, right? It feels sort of interactive because I think you sometimes think, oh, I feel like I'm in this conversation. I feel like the podcast host is right there in my ear. Like that is a little bit, I would say, immersive, not interactive, but immersive. Accessibility, employees can consume content during commutes or multitasking. This was mentioned before. Increasing productivity, we love that. Localization, podcasts can easily be translated and adapted for diverse global teams. So true. Individual learners, flexibility, podcasts fit into busy schedules, promoting lifelong learning, retention, storytelling, tone variation, and real-world examples in audio can enhance memory. And that's something you can put in the box. Give me some real-world examples of how this works. And actually, in other examples that I've heard, they make up real-world examples. They're like, oh yeah, I was walking to work today, and I looked down the street, and I saw this girl, and like they make up examples, stories that that demonstrate the concepts that they're talking about that are uploaded in the document. It's the craziest thing. So absolutely storytelling. Tone variation and real world examples in audio can enhance memory. Oh my goodness, this is true. So lastly, for individual learners, motivation. Personalized audio content can inspire learners to engage with more challenging subjects. Absolutely. So here's some implications for corporate learning. Micro learning revolution. Podcasts naturally align with micro learning strategies, breaking down complex training modules into short, digestible episodes. I love the micro learning revolution, and don't you? This is a really good example of chunking it. You could even, you can break this in however small pieces that you need to, but even just having like a 7 to 10 minute thing, like that's pretty short compared to like sitting down for a half an hour or an hour training. It's wonderful. Anywhere, anytime, right? Leadership training. Executives could benefit from on-the-go leadership sessions. Soft skills development podcasts could model real-world scenarios for improving communication, emotional intelligence, and decision-making. And again, that's one of those things you can just type into ChatGPT. It comes up with the content. Boom. Employee onboarding podcasts could humanize the onboarding process, sharing company history and culture in a conversational tone. Wow, that is so, like, I almost said the word humanizing, and I think it is, right? And sometimes last night, for example, my daughter wanted to talk, and my brain was fried, and she was like, Dad, I'm stressed out, I need to talk to somebody. And I was like, well, I don't want to just push you off onto a robot, but so I sat down with her on her bed. We sat down together, and I said, well, let's talk to ChatGPT. And she's like, I hate ChatGPT because it doesn't understand human problems. And I said, well, let's see what it can do, right? So I opened it up, and I said, hey, I think, so just to clarify, when you talk to ChatGPT, it doesn't really know right now if there's multiple people talking to it. So I just said, hey, I'm a 14-year-old girl. I'm feeling really stressed, and I need some help calming down. Can you ask me several questions one at a time in order to talk through, what I'm feeling? And it did a fantastic job. And I just sat there, and she kind of talked to it, and I could tell that she was really authentically engaging with it, and similar to the way that we listen to these podcasts, and it just helps us feel a little bit of human connection, which is very, very strange and controversial, I know. But by the time that my daughter had talked to this for several minutes, she was feeling much better, just audibly hearing it in her voice. She was happier. I could see it in her face, like wonderful. So when I couldn't give any more, there it was to fill in the gap. Amazing. Implications for higher education, blended learning. Professors could supplement lectures with podcast episodes, enhancing accessibility and engagement. Accessible materials. Podcast helps bridge equity gaps for students with disabilities or those unable to afford textbooks. Well, isn't that interesting? I had not considered that. When it said bridge equity gaps, I was thinking about like when let's say that students are studying Shakespeare. You have to take this required uh, humanities class, and you're studying Shakespeare, and modern language, modern English has come so far from Shakespearean language that it is difficult unless you spent a great deal of time. Like in my youth, I read the Bible a lot, and so I kind of had a feel for that old-timey English, but it's just like if you haven't done that, it's almost impossible to understand. And you're taking one class on the topic, and it's like, holy cow, this is really difficult. But and it can be a deflection from certain groups. Like if you come from a place of poverty growing up, and you're not exposed to Shakespeare, or for whatever reason, like the Bible or some old book like literature, you might have a really tough time getting through those courses. They can act as a barrier to progressing through your college experience, or your growing up experience in high school. And so this can be a bridge for those equity gaps, like talking through and making it easy to understand and chunkable and relatable, and like breaking it down into simple text, similar to how you could with ChatGPT. But I think this provides that conversation. So one of the problems that I see students having with ChatGPT is they're not sure what to ask sometimes, especially if they're not using the voice mode, the advanced voice mode that I was using with my daughter that I mentioned. And so this kind of asks the questions itself and kind of guides it through. I think it also models investigative thinking. It models a kind of an exploratory intellectual conversation. So as young students in the world, or even as professionals, we can see how to pull topics apart. And especially like if you're a leader and you're thinking, okay, how can I use this to? I've written this document, or I've sponsored this document, and I've read it. I've skimmed it at least, and now I understand it. But I need to figure out how to share it with others. You could then create one of these podcasts that talks through it and get ideas on how to present this in very simple ways to the audience. I would even potentially use it to rewrite a document, to run it through there and say, like I'm realizing now that these are the takeaways, and I had kind of buried the lead, and this is what I need to say in the front of it, right? And you could use ChatGPT then to give that direction and have it rewrite, or do it yourself if there's a lot of pieces in there that just cannot be changed. So let's move on. Active learning. Students could reflect on podcasts during discussions or as part of flipped classroom activities. And lastly, continuing education. Alumni could access podcasts for ongoing professional development, fostering lifelong learning connections with their alma mater. Isn't this cool? So what does this mean for the future? And it has 3 specific points here, and I'm going to add to these because I have my own thoughts. But first, let me touch on this: personalized learning experiences. So learners could select podcast content tailored to their pace, style, and interest, embracing personalized and adaptive learning models. So that's really cool. Global learning networks. Podcasts could connect global learners, enabling crowdsourced collaborative content creation and consumption. That's really interesting. And democratization of knowledge. There we go. That's kind of where I'm going with it. Podcasts break down barriers to accessing complex documents and ideas, making education more inclusive and equitable. That's what I'm talking about. So also, as we get more tools like this, I think that the the difficult work of instructional design. We talked about some of those instructional design theories. Um, Constructivism, cognitive load theory. Cognitive load theory is something that like you always have to think through and balance as an instructional designer. And you're often pulling through like, okay, how can I put some experiential learning in here, and how can I go into other industries like human performance improvement and bring in some deliberate practice in order to not just do kind of a knowledge exposure thing, but more of a performance improvement thing. And when we're thinking through this, we're having to utilize like years of knowledge and experience and nuance and thinking about, okay, how will this impact the organization? But like more and more, these tools are getting easier to use to do this. And so for the meantime, I think that there's more than enough instructional design to do. This can just make our jobs easier, make us more effective, perhaps 40%, 50%, maybe 50% or more effective in what we do. And certainly I've noticed like basically about a third of the instructional design work that I still do is automatable, and I just like throw it into ChatGPT. I throw it into a tool like this, and I'm like basically automating a third of that work. And I think that as I push more into it and as I discover more tools, that is definitely going up. You may have seen Articulate Rise and the latest AI tools in there. Like if you haven't, go check it out. I wish I had a partnership with them because their stuff is so expensive, but it's less than Lectora, right? Anyway, this is such a cool tool, and where I see this going in the future is that maybe AI can do 30 to 50% of the work of instructional designers right now. And that's just the design part, right? There's other pieces like the interviewing where you can send a bot to go do an interview for you. And then you can take this transcript and you can interview 50 people if you had to at the same time, and then take all those transcripts, and then you can create the content from that using AI to crunch it and chunk it however you want. So tools like this, I think, will become more than 30 to 50%. I think it will become 80 to 90%, and we'll be able to create not just much faster, but I think that also individuals, exactly how this tool was positioned, will be able to create that learning for themselves. Similarly, when I'm learning a new skill, so recently I picked up the skill of financial modeling, and I had done a lot of like basic financial modeling, but really to use like industry standard formats and like all the right vocab in the right places, like I had to do a lot of learning. And so what I do, like I look some things up on sites like Investopedia, but I also use ChatGPT and Claude a lot to learn terms. And like I was like, is this word the same as this word? Is this word the same as this word and this word? Like, oh, okay, I get it now. And so there's a massive amount of self-learning that can now take place, and I think that lightens the load for instructional designers. So surely there's enough and work for experienced instructional designers, but if you're thinking about getting into the industry, I think it's just one of these things where unless you can learn AI really fast and jump into it with both feet and just grab on to the AI scene and, like I said, become 50+% more productive with these tools, I don't think it's a good idea to enter the field at all right now, because there's going to be that same thing happening as that happened with software engineers, where there's this many people and there's this much work, and then more of it gets siphoned off to overseas and near shore. And so the opportunities right now are to learn as much as you can about AI and become an expert in using AI in what you do. If you've made it this far, go ahead and give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.